Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
My name is Reggie Miller. I lead Global Inclusion and Diversity for VF Corporation. Before I get started with what he talked about, I want to acknowledge a couple of people. Two members of my team are in the room. So Joe Bryant II is there in the back on my right. And Ariel Watkins is on my left in the back as well. I attended my first OR show in July of last year, and one of the things that is interesting, and I was having this discussion a little earlier, is when I think back to what I saw at that show and I look at this room, it's two completely different stories, right? And when I think about what the future of not only the outdoor industry and how we get engaged in this space is, it's really truly what I see in this room. It's a collection of people from all different backgrounds and spaces and places all coming together to support outdoor living and outdoor activities as well. And so what I want to get out of today is not necessarily the solutions that I have come up with my team, but what solutions that you see to help make this better, help make the industry better, and help to get more people outside.
I think this is working. Oh, yeah. Sorry, Reggie. I actually am super uncomfortable with microphones as the outdoor educator that I am, but I also have a terrible yelling voice, so I will use this so that the folks in the back aren't like, ugh. But my name is Elise Rylander. I use she, her pronouns. I currently live in Bellingham, Washington, and I'm coming up on my 15th year in the outdoor industry, so I've been around for not as long as some, but I have been around for a minute. And things have absolutely evolved, I think, as we have all been witness to, especially in the last couple of years. And I started work in this equity space, I think more explicitly, maybe around 7 or 8 years ago, and I was seeing a significant gap in LGBTQ young folks entering into outdoor education programs and feeling the immense positive impact that those experiences had on me as a young queer person and the way in which I was able to find myself in community. I was someone who felt that profound, that motivation to be able to provide those experiences for other young folks that were maybe self-selecting out of mainstream programs. So that's how I kind of entered into the space, and now we're heading into our 5th year as a nonprofit, and the nonprofit's Out There Adventures, and we do that work. So we provide those outdoor opportunities through a whole host of different ways for LGBTQ young folks across the country. From that and continuation of trying to amplify the voices of queer folks in these spaces and unearth some of those stories, because I was having a conversation, I think maybe earlier today, with some folks about how we know that queer folks have been around and in these spaces, they aren't always visible, right? So doing that work of figuring out what is our history in this space and bringing that forth so that those stories can become a bigger part of this collective narrative. So with that, we started the LGBTQ Outdoor Summit, which is heading into its 3rd year. I'm going to be up here in Estes Park in September. And then I think, as is true with all of us, when you represent these different communities, or you're held up to represent these different communities, you end up doing this equity work, right? People call you to come in and help them with things. And so I have been doing that work as well as a partner with the Avarna Group for about the last 1.5 years. And my hope for today is that we can continue these conversations about how do we work across these different spaces and support each other, right? So I don't want to sound like a broken record, but how do we really enact this in solidarity topic, right? How do we have these conversations and move through these differences? And I think that we don't think about that ability, or we don't see that as a strength of ourselves as a community because of what is often perpetuated and heard the loudest on social media. But as Jose was alluding to, there are lots of conversations that are happening that are unearthing that idea of difference, right? And so I'm coming from my space and my perspective, so how do I meet you in the middle, and how do you come to meet me as well? Those things are happening. I just would like to see those conversations be upheld and made more visible, so that we don't get kind of stuck in this place of like, oh man, this shit's just really hard, and no one's doing it well, right? We are doing it well, but how do we amplify that a little bit more?
Can you guys hear me okay?
I want you to strain your voice down. I know you're tired.
Well, I'm Teresa Baker, and I work on efforts of diversity and inclusion in the outdoors. And I do that through various partnerships with many of you in the room. I also do that through the Outdoor CEO Diversity Pledge and African American Nature and Parks Experience. And what I hope to get out of this is sincere dialogue, not the BS that we often hear, but sincere dialogue, your truth, whatever that is. If you're scared, if you don't know the way forward, whatever that looks like, that's my hope for this gathering, and that we start to build relationships with one another so that we can move forward, so that the obstacle of, well, we don't know how to reach X or Z. X and Z are here in this audience right now. So my hope is that we connect with one another and move forward to do some amazing things.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So with that set of intentions, we're going to do two things. The first one is a reminder. We are representative of some things, and there's also not representation across the board. So we have these conversations. Don't hesitate to remind us and remind yourselves about, and here's who's not at the table, right, that I wish was, and how can I be in support of that voice. Right? So you don't think like, well, this is it, we got it all. We don't. Collectively, we have more, and there was more out there. So that's the first bit. And then also an example of, you literally have executive level individual of a major corporation saying, I want to know how we do this better. Here's some things that I'm excited to tell you about what's working. I'm here to go ahead and listen. So what are some things you're going to be willing to give that also, honestly, I want to like lean in and listen. And building off of what Spark 2020, one conversation that came up is, if I represent a brand, it also helps me when you begin the conversation acknowledging me as a person, right? And that I don't become the receptacle to unload everything that I know is hard about the brand. So just imagine, think about that, because then you don't want Reggie to be like, okay, I hear you, and I don't know if I want to keep hearing you. Right? Because then he has more power and privilege to be able to benefit from that, right? So think about that. And he's really extending it there. With Elise, one of the things we talked about is like, I'm trying to build an organization from the ground up. I'm excited about creating something that I didn't see, and it's hard, and I'm asking brands like, help me, right? And I'm frustrated with you, and I like you, and I'm frustrated with you, and now, I like you. But that shouldn't be the dynamic of trying to create something. And then similar with Teresa as an advocate, to push, and then also I'm learning how to do things differently. Right? How I started, I understand I can evolve and continue to do things differently for the purpose of the work. Right? So that's what I'm going to lay out there. So we're going to give you about 5, no more than 10 minutes. You'll hear a little sound to call us back. So now in your tables, do 2 things. One is take the opportunity to say hi. If there's someone you don't know at the table, introduce yourselves. Start those relationships. And I'm going to ask you the first question, and after some time, I'm going to call to attention. We're going to select a table or a grouping in the back for one of you as a kind of representative speaker to share what came at that table. And then our panelists will build on that and their expertise and experience and kind of what they would put around for what's working. Right? Yep. All right. So we're going to start off with the question, which is, what does healthy feedback, quote unquote, right, look like between you and somebody else in this space, especially as you're thinking of for-profit, non-profit, corporate, community-based organization, and equity and inclusion in the outdoors. So begin to talk the conversations like, what does quote unquote healthy feedback? You can talk about defining that. The point is, there's some hard stuff. So what are the ways in which we can say, I want to hear what that is, and I'm willing to hear it, and this is what's been helpful to me. I'm talking to a brand that I haven't been happy with, and then now I understand that I wasn't listening to what they were saying, and they weren't listening to what I was saying. So what does healthy feedback look like in this space? Go for it.
There you go. Yeah, I'm finished.
And the panelists will be walking around too.
We'll just go
Listen in, go check in.